Okay, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're in a coffee shop, maybe Tokyo, maybe San Francisco. It's just a normal Tuesday. And then the coffee in your cup starts to ripple, just a little. You know, like that scene in Jurassic Park, but heavier.
Oh, I know that feeling.
And then the ground jumps. Not a shake, a jump. You look out the window.
Yeah.
And rising out of the bay is something that just, it shouldn't exist. It's towering over the bridge. It's covered in kelp. It's breathing radioactive fire. And it looks furious.
It's the ultimate cinematic spectacle, isn't it? The giant monster, the creature that reminds us very, very loudly that we are not at the top of the food chain.
Exactly. And we've all seen the movies. We've seen the GIFs. You know, the guys in the rubber suits knocking over cardboard pagodas. We all know the roar.
Of course.
But today, on the deep dive, we're ignoring all that surface-level popcorn stuff. We're going way deeper. We're talking about a genre that is, well, it's arguably the most successful export of Japanese pop culture in history. We're talking about kaiju.
And honestly, pop culture almost feels a bit small for what this really is, because when you peel back the rubber suit, you find this whole history of profound national trauma, incredible innovation and special effects, and a linguistic rabbit hole that goes back centuries.
That's our mission today. We're going to move you from just, oh, look, a big lizard, to actually understanding the difference between a kaiju, a seijin, and a kaijin.
Yeah, all those terms.
And we're going to look at why the physics of a guy in a suit, believe it or not, sometimes works better than CGI.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to figure out why a genre that critics literally called juvenile trash in the 1950s is still dominating the global box office 70 years later.
It is a massive topic, so where do you want to start? The bomb, the suits.
Let's start with the word itself. Because I think most people, and I'll include myself in this, you hear kaiju and you just think Godzilla. But the word's been around a lot longer than the movie studios, right?
Oh, much, much longer. If you look at the etymology, the Japanese word kaiju is written with two characters. You have kai, which means strange or mystery, and then ju, which means beast.
So, strange beast.
Literally strange beast.
That sounds almost mythological.
It is mythological. The term didn't start with film at all. It was originally used to describe creatures from, ancient folklore. You see it in the Shanhai Jing, which is this ancient Chinese text, basically a catalog of beasts and demons.
Classic of mountains and seas.
Right, that's the one. And when that text made its way to Japan, the whole concept of the kaiju, this strange beast from beyond the edges of civilization, it just took root.
So originally, a kaiju wasn't necessarily a giant dinosaur destroying a city. It could be anything weird.
Exactly. It was a catch-all for the inexplicable biological world. I mean, in the Meiji era, when Japan opened up and started importing Western science, they used the word kaiju to describe completely real things.
Like what?
Well, if you were a Japanese student in, say, 1880, and you saw a fossil of a triceratops for the first time, or even just a drawing of a hippopotamus in a foreign book.
A hippo would be a kaiju.
That was a kaiju. It was a strange beast you'd never seen before.
That actually makes a lot of sense. A hippo is pretty strange if you've never seen one.
Right, but this is where the Western understanding of the word gets it wrong. In English, we use kaiju specifically to mean giant monster.
Right, big monster.
But in Japanese, size isn't inherent to the word. A kaiju can be human-sized. It can even be small. If you want to specify the skyscraper toppling variety, the correct term is daikaiju.
Dai, that means big, right?
Yes, exactly. Dai is the prefix for giant. So the 1954 film, it's not just a kaiju movie. If you look at the original poster, it explicitly calls it a Subaku Daikaiju Iga.
Okay, which translates to
H-bomb giant monster movie.
Wow, they really put H-bomb right there in the title. They were not hiding the metaphor at all.
Not even a little bit. And we will get to that because you absolutely cannot understand this genre without understanding the hydrogen bomb. But before we get to the nuclear age, I do want to address a big misconception.
What's that?
There's this idea that Japan just invented the whole giant monster attacking a city trope out of thin air.
Well, yeah. I mean, didn't they? That's the whole Godzilla thing.
Actually, no. If we're looking for, let's call it patient zero, the very first time a giant beast wrecked a metropolis on screen, we have to go back to 1921, and we have to go to America.
1921, that's the silent era.
It is. There was this animated short called The Pet by Winsor McCay. He's the genius who did Little Nemo.
Oh, right.
And in The Pet, this mysterious animal just eats everything in sight, grows to a colossal size, and starts rampaging through a city.
So how did they stop it?
An airstrike. The military flies in and bombs it.
Huh. That sounds suspiciously like the ending of a very, very famous giant ape movie.
The blueprint was there a full decade before King Kong. But if you want to talk live action, the real pioneer is The Lost World in 1925.
Based on the Arthur Conan Doyle book.
That's the one. It had these incredible stop-motion dinosaurs by Willis O'Brien, and the climax of that film is a brontosaurus escaping captivity and just smashing up London. It destroys Tower Bridge.
So London got flattened 30 years before Tokyo did. Who knew?
Exactly. And The Lost World was basically the proof of concept for Willis O'Brien's masterpiece, which was, of course, King Kong in 1933.
The grandfather of them all.
Truly, King Kong changed everything. It was a global phenomenon, and it established all the rules. Giant creature, modern city, a hopeless military, and that tragic ending. Japan was watching this very closely.
Right, and I saw this in the nose. They even tried to cash in immediately, didn't they? There were Japanese King Kong ripoffs in the 30s.
Ripoff might be a little harsh, but yeah. In 1933, there was a film called Waseiga Kongu, Japanese King Kong, and then in 1934, one called The Great Buddha Arrival.
Wait, The Great Buddha Arrival? That sounds amazing.
It was. A giant Buddha statue comes to life and just walks through the city. The problem is, sadly, these films are lost. They were either destroyed during the war or just lost to time.
Oh, that's a shame.
All we have are a few still photographs, but they prove that the Japanese film industry was already experimenting with Kaiju concepts way, way before the 1950s.
So the appetite was there, the concept was there, but the monsters in the 20s and 30s, they were different. You know, Kong is just a big ape. The dinosaur in the Lost World is just a dinosaur. They're natural animals from a lost world.
Correct. That was what you could call the prehistoric era. The theme was always man discovers something ancient. But then 1945 happens, the atomic age begins, and the monsters change.
They stop being discovered.
They start being created.
This is the shift to the mutant era.
Yes. The 1950s introduced this new fear of science gone wrong. And the first major example is, again, actually American, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms in 1953.
Ah, a classic Ray Harryhausen film.
The best. In that movie, a fictional dinosaur, a Rhedosaurus, is frozen in the Arctic ice. But what wakes it up? A nuclear test.
And here's a little nugget I found fascinating. When that movie was released in Japan, they changed the title. Do you know what they called it?
I do. The Atomic Kaiju appears.
The Atomic Kaiju appears. That is the very first time the word kaiju appears in a film title. So you've got the American concept of the atomic monster merging with the Japanese word kaiju, and that collision just sets the stage perfectly for 1954.
The year it all changed, the release of Godzilla.
Okay, we need to pause here. Because if you're listening to this and you just think of Godzilla as the king of the monsters who fights King Kong and, saves the day, you are missing the entire point of the original film.
You really, really are. The 1954 Godzilla, directed by Ishiro Honda, is not an action movie. It's a horror film. It's a somber, terrifying tragedy. And to understand why, you have to understand the headspace of the Japanese audience in 1954.
We're talking less than a decade after Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Correct. But there was a more immediate trigger, the Lucky Dragon 5 incident.
Tell us about that. The notes mentioned it, but I feel like the gravity of it gets lost in the history books.
It was a complete nightmare. In March of 1954, a Japanese tuna fishing boat, the Daigo Fukuri Maru, the Lucky Dragon 5, was trawling in the Pacific.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to them, the United States was conducting a hydrogen bomb test at Bikini Atoll. The Castle Bravo test.
And the test was way bigger than they expected it to be, wasn't it?
Much, much bigger. The wind carried the radioactive fallout, this white ash they called death ash, directly onto the fishing boat. The crew didn't know what it was. They were covered in it.
Oh, my God.
They returned to port, and within days, they were all showing signs of acute radiation syndrome. Their skin turned black. Their hair fell out. The radio operator, Kubayama Aikichi, he eventually died.
And this wasn't some secret, right? This was national news.
It was hysteria. You have to picture the panic. Suddenly, they're using Geiger counters in fish markets all across Japan. People were terrified to eat sushi. Tons and tons of tuna were being buried because they were radioactive. The ocean, which had always been Japan's lifeblood, had turned against them.
And that is exactly how Godzilla starts.
It's a direct recreation. The opening scene of Godzilla isn't a city being smashed, it's a fishing boat. There's a flash of light, the ocean boils, and the crew screams.
Wow.
When Japanese audiences sat in that theater in 1954, they weren't thinking, oh, cool, a monster. They were thinking, This is the news from last week.
That gives me chills. It completely
Yes.
reframes the whole thing. Godzilla wasn't just a dinosaur. He was the bomb.
He was the bomb given flesh. His skin was designed to look like the keloid scars of the Hiroshima survivors. His breath wasn't fire, it was pure radiation. And the destruction of Tokyo in that film, it isn't played for thrills. It's meant to evoke the fire bombings of World War II. It's slow and painful and just dark.
It's interesting, though, because despite all that heavy artistic intent, the critics at the time didn't really get it, did they?
Oh, they hated it. They called it juvenile gimmicks. They thought it was exploitative. But the public got it. It was a way to process this unbelievable trauma in a safe environment. It was a massive commercial success.
And because it was a success, Toho Studios did what studios always do.
They rushed a sequel immediately. Godzilla Raids again came out in 1955. And this film introduced the single most important evolution in the entire genre.
Which was?
The enemy monster.
Enter Anguirus.
The spiky ankylosaurus, yeah. In the first film, Godzilla fought humanity. In the second film, he fights Anguirus. And this shifted the entire paradigm from man versus nature to monster versus monster.
Which, let's be honest, is what most of us grew up with. The wrestling matches.
It kicked off the golden age. The films became lighter, more action-oriented. We even developed specific terminology for the fights. So if it's one-on-one, like, say, King Kong versus Godzilla, we call that a monster duel.
A polite duel.
Ha! As polite as two 50-meter reptiles can be. But if you have multiple monsters, a chaotic brawl, that is a monster rumble.
A battle royale.
Exactly. The definitive monster rumble was Ghidorah, the three-headed monster in 1964. You had Godzilla, Rodan, and Mothra, who were all former enemies, teaming up to fight King Ghidorah.
And speaking of Ghidorah, that brings us into the 1960s. The space age. The themes shift again. We move away from the grim nuclear metaphor and start looking up at the stars.
Absolutely. The space race was on everyone's mind, so naturally the monsters started coming from space. King Ghidorah isn't a mutant, he's a space dragon. We got films like The X from outer space. Aliens started showing up, usually using the monsters as biological weapons to try and conquer Earth.
And you can't talk about the 60s without mentioning the competition.
Huh?
Toho had the market cornered with Godzilla, but Diafilm wanted a piece of the action. So they created the giant flying turtle.
Gamera.
I have to say, just for the sheer weirdness factor, I love Gamera. He flies by spinning like a UFO. It's ridiculous.
Gamera is fascinating because his evolution perfectly mirrors the genre's shift toward younger and younger audiences. He started as a threat in his first film, but the studio saw that kids loved the monsters, so they pivoted.
And he became, what was it?
Gamera became the friend to all children, or the guardian of children.
Which is such a hilarious pivot. Don't worry, kids. The giant fire-breathing turtle is here to save you by crushing that entire city block over there.
It worked, though. It cemented the idea that kaiju could be heroes, or at least protectors. They became defenders of the Earth, rather than just walking natural disasters.
Okay, so we've got the history down. We've gone from the trauma of Godzilla to the space wrestling matches of the 70s. But one thing I promise is that we'd help decode the vocabulary. Because if you dive into this stuff, you get hit with all these specific terms. Mecha, Kaijin, Seijin.
It can be a little overwhelming, but the distinctions are actually really useful. They function as a kind of taxonomy for Japanese pop culture.
All right, let's do a field guide to Kaiju. I'll throw a term at you. You give me the definition, but also, like, the mental model. How do I spot one in the wild?
Alrighty, let's do it.
First up, Mecha Kaiju.
Okay, that one's the easiest. These are mechanical or cybernetic monsters.
So robots.
Yeah, but specifically robots built in the image of a monster. Usually they're created by aliens to invade or by humans to defend against the biological kaiju. The classic example is, of course, Mechagodzilla, introduced in 1974.
Who is arguably cooler than the real Godzilla. He has finger missiles.
He is a huge fan favorite. There's also Matani Kong back in 1967. The key here is just that they are artificial. They represent technology trying to match the raw power of nature.
Got it. Okay, next term. This one confuses people because it sounds like kaiju, but it's different. Kaijin.
Right, kaijin. Literally strange person.
Strange person. So my neighbor.
Well, perhaps. But in tokusatsu terms, these are human-sized or maybe slightly larger, distorted humanoids.
Okay, so if I'm watching a show, how do I know if I'm looking at a small kaiju or a kaijin? Is it just about the height?
Height is part of it, but the real litmus test is agency.
Agency, what do you mean?
Well, think about Godzilla. Does Godzilla have a political agenda? Does he give a big monologue about the flaws of capitalism before he steps on a train?
No, he just roars and breaks stuff. He's an animal, a force of nature.
Exactly. A kaiju is treated like a hurricane or an earthquake. A kaijin, on the other hand, typically has human-level intelligence, speech, and a specific, usually nefarious plot.
So, kind of like the weekly villains in Power Rangers.
That is the perfect example. The term goes back to 1930s literature, but in modern pop culture, think of the villains in Kamen Rider or the foot soldiers in Super Sentai, which is what Power Rangers is based on. If it talks to you and explains its evil plan, it's a kaijin. If it just tries to eat you, it's a kaiju.
That is incredibly helpful. Okay, next one. Seijin.
Star people. This is the Japanese term for extraterrestrials.
Like aliens.
Yep. But specifically in this genre, Seijin are often the puppet masters. They're the ones controlling the kaiju. A famous example would be Alien Baltan from the Ultraman series. They look like these weird cicada people.
Cicada people, that's terrifying. And finally, what's an ultra kaiju?
That's just a branding classification, really. It refers specifically to any monster that appears in the long-running Ultra series Ultraman. Because that franchise has been going since 1966 and has such a massive bestiary, they just get their own subcategory.
It's like the Marvel Universe versus the DC Universe. They've got their own roster.
Precisely.
So we know what they are, we know where they came from, but we have to talk about how they're made. Because this is the thing that I think prevents a lot of modern Western audiences from getting into the old movies. They see the suit.
They see the zipper.
They see the zipper. They see the rubber folds, and they laugh. They compare it to Jurassic Park or Avatar, and they just say it looks fake. But you'd argue that suitmation, the technique of a guy in a suit, is a legitimate art form with its own physics.
It is absolutely an art form. And to understand it, you have to talk about the man who invented it. Eiji Tsuburaya.
A special effects wizard.
Tsuburaya is a legend. When they were making Godzilla in '54, they considered using stop motion, like King Kong. But stop motion is incredibly time-consuming. You're moving a puppet a tiny fraction of an inch, taking a photo, moving it again. It takes months.
And Toho did not have months.
They had a release date breathing down their necks. So Tsuburaya decided to build a suit. But he ran into a really big problem. How do you make a 6-foot-tall actor look like a 50-meter-tall monster?
It's a scale problem.
It's a physics problem. Think about mass. When you watch old stop motion, as brilliant as Harryhausen's work is, the creatures can sometimes feel a bit weightless. They're jittery.
Right, they feel light.
Tsuburaya realized that to sell the scale, you needed actual physical resistance. You needed the suit itself to be heavy. The very first Godzilla suit weighed over 200 pounds.
200 pounds.
Yeah, it was made of concrete, rubber, and wire. The actor inside, Haruo Nakajima, he was a judo expert, and even he could barely move in it. He was constantly passing out from heat exhaustion. But that struggle is what translated to the screen.
Because he literally had to lumber. He couldn't just walk normally.
Exactly. But the real magic trick, the thing that truly makes suitmation work, is the frame rate.
Oh, talk to me about the cameras.
Okay, so standard film runs at 24 frames per second. If you film a guy in a suit at 24 frames per second, it looks like a guy in a suit. It looks like a mascot at a baseball game.
It's too fast.
It's way too fast. Giant things move slowly. Gravity seems to act on them differently. So Tsuburaya overcranked the cameras. He filmed at 72 frames per second or even higher, 3 times the normal speed.
Then you play that back at normal speed.
The action is slowed down by a factor of 3. A quick stomp becomes a lumbering, heavy thud. The dust that kicks up from a collapsing building hangs in the air 3 times as long. It gives the destruction a real heft.
That's the secret sauce. That's why even though your brain knows it's a suit, your gut feels the weight of it.
Exactly. It creates an atmosphere that early CGI just couldn't replicate. You look at the 1998 American Godzilla, that CGI was weightless. The monster moved too fast. It felt like a cartoon. Suitmation, or tokusatsu, has a tangible physical presence. It's gritty. You can feel the destruction.
It's really just a stylistic choice then. It's like the difference between a photorealistic painting and a stylized charcoal drawing. They're both art. They just have different goals.
And many fans, myself included, would argue that the limitations of the suit actually helped the storytelling. Because the monster couldn't do backflips, the directors had to rely on composition, on lighting, on silhouette to create fear and awe.
It forces creativity.
Precisely.
So bringing this all together, we've gone from ancient strange beasts in Chinese texts all the way to H-bomb metaphors through the wrestling matches of the Golden Age and the unique craft of suitmation. It's a really rich history.
It is.
But the genre isn't dead. I mean, far from it. We're living in a massive kaiju renaissance right now.
We absolutely are. The MonsterVerse, the legendary pictures movies with Godzilla and Kong, has been a huge box office success. We had Pacific Rim, which was basically Guillermo del Toro's love letter to the whole mecha versus kaiju genre.
Right, and Cloverfield brought the found footage angle to it. And you see it everywhere in pop culture. Pokemon, I mean, half the Pokemon designs are inspired by kaiju. Tyranitar is basically just Godzilla.
And music videos, the Beastie Boys' Intergalactic is a perfect tribute to Giant Robo and Godzilla.
I can hear the robot voice in my head right now. Intergalactic, planetary.
The genre endures because the metaphor is so flexible.
That's the big question I wanted to wrap up with. Why? Why do we still love watching giant monsters smash things? In 1954, it was a clear way to process the trauma of the war and the bomb. But we aren't terrified of the H-bomb in the same way today. So what are we seeing in these monsters now?
That is the fascinating part. The monster evolves to fit the anxiety of the era. In the 50s, it was radiation. In the 70s, it was pollution. There was a monster called Hedorah, the smog monster.
So what about today?
Today, you could easily argue the kaiju represent environmental collapse, climate change.
Nature fighting back.
Exactly. We see storms getting stronger, fires getting bigger. The kaiju is the avatar of a planet that has just had enough of us. It's the revenge of nature narrative.
Okay, that makes sense.
But there's also something deeper, I think, more philosophical. There's this concept called the sublime.
The sublime. Unpack that for us.
The sublime is the feeling you get when you see something so massive, so powerful, and so dangerous that it terrifies you. But because you're viewing it from a safe distance, that terror transforms into awe.
Like staring at a tornado from a storm cellar.
Yeah.
Or a massive thunderstorm from your window.
Exactly. In our modern lives, we think we control everything. We have air conditioning, we have insurance, we have smartphones, we feel like masters of our own domain. The kaiju is a reminder that we are actually very, very small.
It's a reality check.
It is. And in 1954, that reminder was terrifying because of the bomb. But today, in a world that feels increasingly digital and intangible, maybe we actually crave that reminder. We crave the sheer, overwhelming physical awe of a giant beast. Maybe we want to feel small.
That's a really profound way to look at it. So the monster isn't the enemy. The monster is the humility we've lost.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So the next time you scroll past a trailer for the latest monster movie, or you see a clip of a guy in a rubber suit knocking over a model tank, don't just see a juvenile gimmick.
See the strange beast, see the history, see the craft, and see the reflection of our own anxiety staring right back at us.
And maybe, just maybe, root for the lizard. Thanks for taking the dive with us.
Until next time.
Keep watching the skies and the oceans. See ya.